On April 1st, 2026, at 6:35 in the evening, a rocket, taller than the Statue of Liberty, lifted off from Launch Pad 39B at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. It generated 8.8 million pounds of thrust, the most powerful, fully operational deep space rocket on the planet. And sitting on top of it, inside a capsule called Orion, were 4 human beings about to do something no one had done since December of 1972. They were going to the moon. Not to land, not yet, but to fly around it, closer than most satellites orbit Earth, and come back. A 10-day trip covering 695,000 miles. The first crewed lunar mission in 53 years. And everything about it, from the crew to the technology to the politics behind it, tells a story about where humanity is headed next. The crew was Commander Reed Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, mission specialist Christina Cook, all NASA astronauts, and mission specialist Jeremy Hansen from the Canadian Space Agency. Each of them carried a piece of history before the rocket even left the ground. Victor Glover became the first black astronaut to leave low Earth orbit. Christina Cook became the first woman to fly into deep space, and Jeremy Hansen became the first non-American citizen ever sent toward the moon. Cook said before launch that the mission was not about celebrating individuals. It was about proving that humanity answers the call of space together. The rocket that carried them was the Space Launch System, SLS. 322 feet tall, 3 million individual parts, fueled by liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, with 2 5-segment solid rocket boosters strapped to its sides. When those boosters ignited, the ground shook for miles. People standing on the beach at Cape Canaveral felt the vibration in their chests. Within minutes, the crew was in orbit. But orbit was just the starting line. The next day, April 2nd, came the moment that mattered most: translunar injection. The main engine on Orion's service module fired for 5 minutes and 50 seconds, burning roughly 1,000 pounds of fuel and accelerating the 58,000-pound spacecraft to escape velocity, 22,000 miles per hour, fast enough to break free of Earth's gravity entirely. When the burn ended, Mission Control confirmed the trajectory was perfect. So perfect that the first of 3 planned course correction burns was canceled entirely on April 3rd. The spacecraft was already on an ideal mathematical path to the moon. For the next several days, the crew drifted through deep space. They tested life support systems, they evaluated the cabin, they ran medical experiments. One of the most interesting pieces of hardware on board was a portable exercise device the size of carry-on luggage, a 30-pound flywheel that generates up to 400 pounds of resistance using a simple spool and cord mechanism, like a yo-yo. On the International Space Station, astronauts use treadmills and resistance machines that weigh over 4,000 pounds. In Orion, they have this. It lets them do squats, deadlifts, and rowing in a space barely big enough to stretch out. There was also a biological experiment called AVATAR, short for a Virtual Astronaut Tissue Analog Response. It used organ-on-a-chip technology loaded with actual living cells from each crew member. These micro-engineered tissue samples flew alongside the astronauts, exposed to the same radiation and microgravity, so scientists on Earth could track how each person's biology responded in real time. It is the first step toward personalized space medicine, building individual health profiles for astronauts before sending them to Mars. On April 5th, Flight Day 5, the crew woke up to a song by CeeLo Green. Then Mission Control played a recorded message from Charlie Duke, the Apollo 16 astronaut who walked on the moon in 1972. Duke's lunar module had also been named Orion. 54 years apart, 2 spacecraft named Orion, 2 crews heading to the same place. The connection was not subtle. By this point, the public had latched onto an unexpected subplot, the Orion toilet. Details about how the crew managed their hygiene in a capsule with no shower and a compact waste system became one of the most followed threads of the mission. NASA leaned into it, streaming portions of daily life on board. Then came April 6th, Flight Day 6, the main event. At 12:56 in the afternoon, Orion passed the 248,655-mile mark from Earth. That was the farthest any human being had ever traveled, a record set by the crew of Apollo 13 in 1970, when their spacecraft swung wide around the moon after an explosion forced them to abort their landing. Artemis II broke that record and kept going, reaching a maximum distance of 252,756 miles from Earth, 4,000 miles farther than anyone in history. Then the spacecraft approached the moon itself. As it swung behind the far side, radio contact with Earth was severed. For 40 minutes, the crew was completely alone. No signal could reach them, no voice from Houston, nothing but the moon below and the void above. When they emerged from behind the far side, they saw an Earthrise, the planet lifting above the lunar horizon, blue and white and impossibly small against the black. At closest approach, Orion passed just 4,067 miles above the lunar surface, traveling 60,863 miles per hour relative to Earth. The crew photographed the surface with high-resolution cameras, capturing features of the far side that no human eyes had ever directly seen. They witnessed a total solar eclipse from their position, the sun disappearing behind the dark disk of the moon, its corona glowing around the edges. They looked for flashes of light from meteoroids hitting the surface. They named two small craters, one called Integrity after their spacecraft, and another named by Commander Reed Wiseman in a private, emotional moment after his late wife. After the flyby, President Trump called the crew live. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman closed the public broadcast by saying, "On behalf of NASA and space-loving people across the world, thank you for taking us with you to the moon." The crew is now heading home. Splashdown is scheduled for April 10th off the coast of San Diego. Recovery teams on the USS John P. Murtha will retrieve them by helicopter. Then medical evaluations. Then a flight to Houston. Then debriefing. And then the real work begins. Because Artemis II was never the destination. It was the proof of concept. The next mission, Artemis III, was originally supposed to land humans on the moon. That plan has changed. Due to delays in SpaceX's Starship lunar lander and the new extravehicular spacesuits, NASA restructured the timeline. Artemis III, now scheduled for mid-2027, will not land on the moon. Instead, it will test orbital docking and cryogenic fuel transfer in low Earth orbit. The first actual landing has been pushed to Artemis IV in early 2028. But Artemis II proved the most important thing. The hardware works. The rocket works. The capsule works. The trajectory math works. The heat shield works. And 4 human beings can survive a 10-day round trip to the moon and back in a spacecraft smaller than a studio apartment. 53 years ago, Gene Cernan climbed back into the Apollo 17 lunar module and left the moon. He was the last human to stand on its surface. He said he expected us to go back. It took more than half a century, but as of April 1st, 2026, humans are flying to the moon again. And this time, the plan is not to visit. The plan is to